happening. Michael Flanders, how are you, mate?
I'm great. How are you, Mr. Phillips?
I'm good, buddy. Well, we go back more than 30 years, you know.
I would say I mean, we met before you went to the US, but we collaborated in probably 93, would you think?
Yeah, I remember we met before the States because that was around 92. I went to live in the States,
Yep.
and you were playing with Looking for Cool, and I was playing with Angie and John and Maria Brosnan in
Yep,
my band.
correct.
I remember
Yep.
that then, and I went over, and I remember when I came back, you were working for, well, it was Manic back then, I think, but
Yep,
which was,
correct.
and
Yep.
you booked me into places like Fridays in Mooloolaba, mate, where I must have been the easiest gig ever. I just stayed there for 10 years, eh?
Yeah. Well, Manny had mentioned that you were coming back and wanted me to assemble some people to put around you, if you remember.
Yeah, I
So
did.
I think it was Gary, Derek, and I think myself put a little band together, and
That's right.
we played Fridays. We played all the Poetry and Beer record we had rehearsed. So
That's right. Yeah, I did poetry and beer over there in Los Angeles, and mate, that was a trip back in those days because I got into the States. We arrived there just the week after the Rodney King riots had gone on, and there was like, we're about to catch a plane, and my friend Adam Smalley would call him and say, "Is it safe to come over?" And he's like, "Yeah, come on over," you know. And this is before stuff started getting into the crossing those invisible boundaries in LA, where it got into some of those regions where the rich people started getting scared. And mate, it was a freaky time over there. I mean, the music was great. Doing what I did with the music was great. But mate, you've just returned from the Nashville life for 12 years now?
13 years. Yeah, 13 years. Yeah. We went over in the very beginning of 2007. So it would be 13 years this February. So nearly 13 years.
And this is how Australian you are, mate. You didn't pick up 1 ounce of American accent.
No, a lot of people said that. I mean, the kids have obviously got, the two little kids have got complete American drawls. You know, Jasmine's worse than Caleb, which are our 18-year-old twins. So they were 4 when we went. Ben was 12, he's 26. So he has a bit of a hybrid accent. And as you probably noticed, when you talk to your friends, I spoke to one of my American friends just before, and you tend to then all of a sudden fall into what they understand. But here, I mean, it was pretty hard for me to have an American accent at 40 something when I went over, you know?
Yeah.
So.
I think too, mate, you've got such Aussie blood running through your veins that would never really break out.
And the last thing I wanted to do was conform to their accent, of course. The Aussie thing makes you, stand apart from the whole thing, you know, and you are what you are. So I never try to change it. A lot of people, you hear them try and put a fake accent on. It's like, oh, come on, you know. It's
I remember the only problem I had was going into the shop and asking for a straw, and this girl just looking at me. Well, what straw? It had to be a straw. She got when I said straw, she got it, but when I said straw,
I wondering what you're going to do with it too. You looked like a rock star back in '91, you know. So could have been suspicious.
So, mate, did it ever feel like home for you over there? I imagine it did.
Completely. I mean, I've made the mistake over the last week or so saying home, and that's there, you know.
Yep.
When we're back home, it felt last house we had, I felt very comfortable. It was very homely. It had spaces for us all to go to our own space and work or meditate or do whatever you want to do. Wonderful views of the lake. It was a very big house. It was a 3-story house, so it was easy to escape from each other. At night, I could go downstairs and practice my steel guitar and make noise and not bother anybody, you know.
Yeah.
So that you know what that's like. Home is where your pillow is, kind of thing. And when your pillow's there for so long, and it was a kind of house that just made you feel good when you're in it. So when COVID hit, I was already working from home, so it wasn't like I was changing anything. I just had to put a mask on if I went to the store, you know.
Obviously, like people here and musicians here and everything, Nashville's got that aura about it of being this special, amazing place and everything else. And it's not a very big city, is it?
I think it's going to become another Atlanta. There's so many people moving there, but I mean, when we first got there, it felt more like a country town. Brisbane felt like it was really being, getting very congested with traffic. And I actually one of the frustrations I remembered before I left, I was actually on my mobile phone going to a gig, ringing your wife, actually saying, hey, I'm late to this gig. I'm caught in traffic. And then I got booked on my mobile phone. Oh. And I was thinking when I left, damn, this is just getting crazy. You can't do anything on the road here. And then I got there and it was completely relaxed. I drove around that city for 13 years with never getting any speeding parking fine at all.
Yeah, right.
It's funny. So they're very lax on some things. So and other things, obviously, they're not.
Yeah. And what about the recent, all the turmoil lately? How was that? How did that affect you and the family? Like, did
it actually did spread out in some areas close to us when the rioting was happening, and obviously we could hear things, and there was a lot of gunshots going on, and and they did try to burn down the Capitol building and all that kind of craziness. So I think we were 30 minutes from the downtown area. Our son was technically just to the right of downtown, so he saw a lot. He saw a lot with the tornado. He woke up in the morning after that. So basically it started tornado, COVID-19, Black Lives Matter rioting, back to COVID-19. So Ben woke up, opened his curtains, and there was a car in the third floor of the building across from him. And he slept through the whole tornado.
Gee.
And then realized that he had no power. And then him and his fiance moved in with us then for the next so many months. They moved in, and then because he had no power for a few days, and then they came back the whole 3 months of shutdown.
We had the earthquake in '94, Northridge earthquake, and that was where some freeways fell down, shopping centres fell down, and there were about 80 people killed, I think, in LA. But there was a big earthquake and scared the hell out of us. But when we first got there, I slept through the first earthquake we had. I like
yeah,
a little one.
I probably would too. We had someone letting a shotgun off down our main street. We were on the corner of a main street in a cove, and my oldest daughter come to stay with us a couple of Christmases ago, and she thought we were playing tricks on her, shooting a gun off out the window to scare her. It was actually a real gun.
Well, that was one of the things that brought us home. We never felt comfortable in LA with the whole gun culture thing. And I mean, we lived in a bit of a redneck area in LA at the time. We were down near Redondo Beach. It was sort of a little bit off the highway, and and it was kind of fairly safe around there. But we had a cop shot just up the road from us, and you'd be driving home from the studio at 3 or 4 in the morning, and you'd always see cops with people lined up against the wall and guns out and this stuff. And
that'd freak me out. Yeah, I didn't see much of that, and we lived in a very nice neighborhood. The houses at the end of our street were more expensive as our house, but one of them just sold for well over $1 million. So it was on the water, very classy, nice homes. There's 3 sort of coves in a row with very kind of some, a lot of music people. Garth Brooks's label manager for Pearl lived in the next street. Lizzie Hale and Joe from Hailstorm, the famous rock band. So there's a few music folks. Larry Carlton bought a house out there on the lake. So I never really felt threatened.
Yeah.
I mean, my neighbours would shoot a beaver or shoot something themselves alone, but they were we were the youngest in the street, so that'll tell you.
Well, I think that's where LA was different back then anyway, because it was real gang culture then, and you had the Bloods and the Crips going on, and you'd be sitting in the shopping centre, and school kids would walk by, and because the school kids were all kind of in the gangs and they were wearing the loose clothing, you'd always be watching them. And I remember sitting back home when we came home, sitting at Stafford Shopping Centre. And I was these school kids were walking by, and I was just keeping my eye on them out of the corner of my eye, and just like, mate, we're back here now. You don't have to do that here.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing was carjacking.
Pull a firearm in their trousers,
Carjacking was big over there then too. So every time you turn up to the setup, pull up at a red light, you'd always make sure your windows were up, your doors were locked. You'd look around. You did back here, and it'd be like you just felt like stupid doing it. But there was good things for getting home. But mates, it's really good that I'm obviously as a mate, I'm glad you're back here, and you got all that we've all got that wealth of knowledge and skills and everything to tap into, mate, that you learnt over there. So what was your musical journey over there? What was your career? What'd you do?
Well, I think leaving here at that point in my career, I was making, as you know, a lot of records for people in the country music industry, and getting sort of poached out of that, and then having the producer skills and the musician skills and the publishing concepts. I think, the typical Aussie, I thought I knew everything until I got there and knew nothing, So it took me some time to then readapt to the American system, having multiple performing rights organizations, and then understanding how they all interact with the writers. And so I did music publishing and the demos for the publishing company. For the first few years, we built the catalogs, and that was kind of fun. A lot of songwriting, so that was fun. My wife did a bunch of songwriting too. And then, as you know, my son then developed into a musician, songwriter, guitar player.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about Ben in a while, but mate, just for people who maybe don't know much about it, just want to give a bit of an explanation for how the song publishing works, because I think it's, for a lot of younger artists here, it's not, because it's not as big an industry here, it's kind of gets overlooked in a lot of their education or their knowledge.
Well, I think that, over there, as I think TV creates fantasy, but to remove the fantasy, people in that culture will sometimes, not so much anymore as much as they used to, but it was a very song publishing, pitching, songwriters town when we got there. So meaning that they call it an outside song. So let's just build this around you for a minute. So let's say you were in Nashville, you were a signed songwriter to a publishing company. The publisher's job would be to exploit the copyrights in the song, meaning pitch that, create a really good demonstration of the song, and then pitch that to all the possibilities to get it cut on a big record from an artist that's signed to a major record label. That is the main focus of a publisher. Now, so it's turned more into a boutique record town where that still goes on, it's just not as much. A lot of artists now write their own material, or it's then getting to co-write with the artist, opposed to you could write with two other writers, and then a Clint Black or a Garth Brooks would cut that song and make you, a lot of money, because when a song sits in the top 10 for 6 weeks, you can make, that songwriter could make $300,000 to $1 million, depending on how much airplay that song's getting,
And has it got affected by, back in our day, mate, when you had the albums or CDs, if you got your song on a Rick Springfield album, it didn't have to be the hit single, but you would make money because the album would sell. Has that changed a lot now with the streaming game, where
well, to me it's become, and you notice it more than reverting back to my normal life as a record maker. Most artists now come to producers and it's a singles game. So they're doing a lot more singles, and they're putting a lot more singles out a lot quicker than they ever used to, and then eventually it becomes an album on that platform. But
I hope it goes around, like the cycle goes around to like a song collection again, because I just remember how cool it was when I was watching a thing the other night, Paul McCartney live with Wings, and it obviously wasn't his highlight compared to the Beatles, but mate, I remember when Venus and Mars came out.
Me too.
I love that album, and you'd study everything written in it. And Jackson Brown's Running on Empty was probably my favorite album of all time, and I knew every linear note on it, and I just loved just going on that journey. And it wasn't just about that song or that hit; it was the whole thing of the collection.
You just hit on Jackson Brown for a second. Jackson said on that documentary that's available to the public, and I like to still call them records because because it's a record of events. And I thought he said it the best. That is so true, because you being a songwriter, when I go back to the time when you and I collaborated on Four Poet Steps or Songs from the Fourth Floor, you were like Bernard Fanning calls it a purple patch. You'll write because you're excited to write, because you're writing for a record, and all those songs are what's happening in your existence at that point in time. And I think that's what's beautiful about a real artist. I find, you can be a great songwriter and you can write a great song, and someone then has to connect with that song to want to love it that much to then cut it on their record as an outside song. That's why you notice I still get, even now, I'm still working for 2 publishers over there. I get the Sony tip sheet and the tip sheet, they call it a tip sheet from Warner Brothers, and they, on there explaining all the artists that are signed to those labels and what they're all looking for. And it'll explain, I'm only looking for singles. We've cut 10 songs. We're looking for 2 singles, which means the artist has written 10 songs with other writers and they haven't written something strong enough to be a single,
I think that's one of the great things too. You got to give him credit for what Ed Sheeran's done from a singer-songwriter. He's like a throwback to the James Taylor, Jackson Browne sort of guys with an acoustic guitar in hand. But people have actually, his albums come out and there's, pretty much every song on the album's become a hit song. But he's actually, his album have been something that people have gotten into, their actual albums. And I see on the horizon that we'll get back to that a bit, because there's always these troughs and lows and cycles that go around. And I think people do get hungry for a bit more complexity. And I think while there's, while a song is good, the journey with an artist can be amazing.
Well, I think thinking people, we're looking for stuff like, you're in the same spot as me now, where we have kids that are pushing music onto us, and it's great that my youngest son is kind of into the Americana kind of country thing that I am.
Well, I heard Jason told me that he mixed some of his stuff he produced over there just the other day and thought it was awesome.
Yeah, I know. It's scary, isn't it? Man, he's a great his ears are amazing as a producer. I mean, some of the songs are very anthemic, and he's working with this singer-songwriter that from New York, actually.
And that of course, we're talking about Caleb Flanders, so just folks know the name and look out for that up-and-coming producer of the future, and awesome bass player too, by the way.
Yeah, he calls himself the okayest bassist on Instagram.
I always thought you, of course, were one of the best guitarists in the whole country, and I hear that you've certainly been knocked down a few ranks by your eldest son.
Oh well, that wouldn't be too hard. I think the good thing is we actually play nothing alike, which is good. He's kind of more melodic and sweet, like his mother's playing. He's kind of taken that side. I think that he's more poppy and I'm more grainy, So Caleb's more grainy, Ben's more poppy, But
there's certainly some. There's so much. What's the name of his release he just did? The album he put out?
Ben's.
Yeah, Ben's.
Zero Gravity.
Zero Gravity. That's it. Sorry, Zero Gravity.
Yeah.
Mate, that is such great playing. If you folks, we're talking about Mike's older son, Ben Flanders, and Zero Gravity is an album he put out. But mate, just tell everyone a bit about the other stuff Ben's been doing, because he's been rocking the freewheel.
So Ben, during COVID, Ben had collaborated in early COVID. He had collaborated with an artist signed to Candy Rat, which is, if you're at all ever, if you're not or you are, there's an artist by the name of Andy McKee, I think it is, McGee, and he's like a really amazing acoustic guitar player. Andy McKee, I think it is. Yeah, Andy McKee. And we'd been kind of hip to this guy for a long time, and but we didn't really know what label he was signed to or whatever. But anyway, Ben did this collab with this other guy. I can't remember the guy's name. He's a really amazing electric guitar player. And he was the first signing, I think, to Candy Rat, because Candy Rat don't do or weren't doing electric guys. They were just doing acoustic guys. All these amazing two-handed guys doing freaky stuff on acoustics. Not a lot of that Tommy Emmanuel style of Chet picking. It was all very new age kind of cool things. And there's probably some of those Chet kind of guys signed there too, but not a lot, I don't think. Anyway, the label reached out to Ben because he made a video of it, and they were really impressed by obviously the amount of likes or views or downloads, whatever, I don't know. And so they offered him a deal, and it was a pretty good deal. I ended up going through the contracts with him and then talking to the label guy over the phone, and the guy, he kind of was, oh, man, I'd like to talk to you more about publishing, So they're more of a modern label, and they they don't operate like a normal label either. They, being virtuosos that they sign, they make their money from obviously from sponsorship things. They make their money from the downloads and the purchase of the tablature. So all these other things opposed to just, a digital download. So they then funded the 2 videos, or 1 video you might see up. I think he's put Tilted up now. So they gave him a budget to shoot 2 videos. So he went down to Georgia, to Atlanta, and they hired a nice studio to do the video shoot. And then they offered him another budget to go and do a couple more. So just back a little bit. So it was kind of interesting that, he was a drummer when we moved to America. He then got hip to guitar. I had given him a guitar that I had hanging on the wall in my Australian studio, and I went back for a trip and I handed that to him and I said, this is a guitar that, your grandfather had, or your pop had refinished. I said, this is something you should have. And then he started getting good on that, sold it like everything, Anyway, long story short, he had met all kinds of different kids at the different school he was at. So he met Ethan Forrest, which was Shannon Forrest's son. Shannon now plays with Toto, but he met Robin Ford and Michael McDonald and all these guys at Shannon's place, and Steve Lukather. So Steve tells Music Man about this prodigy, and they sign him. Music Man signed him at 16. So he was the youngest in the world to be signed to Music Man Guitars. Oh, wow. And then he's still with Music Man now. So, but one of the guitars, just as an off story, turns up at my door one day. It was Ronnie Wood's guitar. Ronnie had, and it still had the scratches from the last Rolling Stones tour on the back. Oh my goodness. From Ronnie's belt, yeah. And I'm like, dude, you got to buy this one. No. I'm just going to use it on the tour, Okay, whatever.
Yeah, some old guy used to own it, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And he got a bunch of, Paul Reed Smith sent him a bunch of guitars when he first started with Scott Stapp, which is his normal job, which is the singer from Creed.
So Ben's the standard guitarist in Scott Stapp.
He's the musical director for the Scott Stapp, the voice of Creed.
We'd see on sometimes when we haven't got Netflix anymore, but we used to have it here, and they had Fox News we'd watch, and every now and then Fox News would have. I'm sorry to say we watch Fox News, but yeah, you get a balanced thing by watching both of them. But every now and then they have these music treats going on. And they'd have these performances, and a couple of them were Scott, and Ben would come on the screen, and all the family'd run out and check out Ben playing. It was great.
I know. We missed it. They were always too early, so we just got photographs of it,
And he auditioned for. He was going to go on road with Madonna too, wasn't he? At one stage.
He was going to do the audition for Madonna. And all kinds of weird political things happened. I mean, let's not go into that. That was a whole different story. Yeah,
I can imagine that'd be a world you'd want to avoid, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, she was on that list, so let's just say that. So, there's another country gig in town that there's a couple of guys, and I don't know them, and I believe they're Australian, but they're called Seaforth, and so his friend Elliot Huff, which is Dan Huff's kid, he's been playing with them. And then he went from there. They got signed and Dan did the record. And then now he's playing with Kane Brown. And so they've asked Ben to do some shows when they get back on with that. So he's going to try and do both if he can, and do a country gig and the rock gig. So
mate, do you reckon Ben would mind if we played one of his tracks?
Oh, God, no. No.
I might play that now. Okay. So, Mike, one of the things that I know people here don't really, it's hard to understand sometimes, is when we lived in LA, people we knew people, and it wasn't, you saw famous people around the place pretty much all the time. But mate, just put things in context. You work with people like Dolly Parton and things like that, didn't you?
Well, I was really tight with her people. Danny Nozell, and he had, Dolly was his main act. He had, Bon Jovi, he had Richie Sambora, Meatloaf. I mean, he just went on and on and on. He actually used to manage Slipknot. But, so to kind of the perspective, it's kind of, how do I put it, without sounding kind of silly, it's kind of normal life there with people that are kind of famous-ish, because they don't treat you any different. You don't treat them any different. So, and it's just, it's a job you're doing, like some of the, I was talking to a buddy today about it. It was kind of funny. He was name dropping, and I said, I got a phone call one day when I was in Los Angeles, actually. It was funny because Danny and Dolly were in the same building as I was staying, and I didn't even know they were there. And then he called me and said, he had kind of like a mobster kind of voice, he sounded like the mafia, because he was Italian. And he said, hey, where are you, And I said, I'm actually on a plane about to fly back to Nashville. I'm in LA. He goes, oh, I'm in LA too. And he said, Dolly and I are about to get on a plane and go to Australia. He said, I'm going to invite your mum and dad. I got platinum passes for them to come to Dolly's show. Do you think they'd be interested? I said, absolutely. And my mum got these platinum passes. I think they were like $350 a ticket or something stupid. Maybe way more expensive. I don't know. But she said she was so close she could touch Dolly. That's how close she was. Wow. She was the most amazing show I've ever had. But the funny thing is, guys like that, they don't need to ring you up and give you gifts like that, No,
but you always find the attitude and the star problems with the new ones who've just made it, because they're still trying to prove themselves. But the ones who've been there all their life, like when we were in Cherokee, we'd be recording, and Cherokee had like these 5 studios in the building. And studio, you'd had Spin Doctors working, and then next door to where we were working, Gene Simmons was producing Lita Ford, and then you had what was Bob Dylan's son name? Wallflowers. He'd be popping he'd be popping in to see the Rob brothers that we were working with, or Ice-T was doing an MTV interview out in the lounge, and it's just these things. But it was all these people. LL Cool J, I remember I met him there, and he was so nice. So no one was being stars; they were just being musos.
Oh, totally.
That was different.
Well, Dolly doesn't put on any airs and graces in normal life. You know what I mean? She doesn't. And she just lived close to us too. She lived around the corner. She had a lake home, and she still had her Brentwood home. But she makes up exactly how you see her before she comes out of her room every day.
But of course, it's a bit of a strange world too. I remember one of my big heroes. I remember you mentioned to me at one time, it was an interesting personality, was Carole King, I think you said.
I never met Carole. No, but Mark Coleman worked with Carole, but I never got to meet Carole.
Okay.
No. No. Holman, he moved from wherever they were, Los Angeles to Austin to make the 1-to-1 Carole King record. But Eric Johnson also worked with Carole King too. So
Matt, with everything you know now, I mean, because you did film work over there as well too, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And everything you've learned, like back in 96, 97, you had a label here called Arctic, which became a sub-label of BMG, and we had Chase's album, music came out there, and we had Four Poet Steps, my album came out through it. And it was an interesting time. It was like the pioneering days in many ways. It was like breaking new ground. You guys were progressing stuff that was happening in Brisbane and flying blind with a lot of the stuff you were learning. What would you do, knowing what you do now, if you were transported back to 96, 97, what would you have done different now to what happened then with the way you approached all that?
Probably know now what the budget would be. I actually would need to do the job properly.
Right.
I probably wouldn't venture into it without the budget, because we did that in the States. It was kind of good because the last probably 5 or 6 years I got to work with some of the biggest radio promoters in the country. I got to work with some of the biggest labels in the country. And, you know, even a little publisher label that I'm still working with now, I mean, he's spending in the thousands every week right now on a small indie country artist. He's actually getting traction. So it's kind of funny that, you know, it's such a different world. I had a meeting with you may remember a label, it's called Broken Bow, and Jason Aldean was broken through Broken Bow. That's the label he was signed to. It was owned by a guy that his name was Benny Brown, that had a bunch of car yards up in California, and he made millions. And he came to Nashville, and his nephew was a lawyer, a music lawyer. Anyway, long story short, took them ages, but eventually they broke Aldean, and Aldean, the rest is history, you know. But he said to me, I was sitting in his office only a few months ago, probably in the cold months, probably, you know, March this year. And he said, if I see an artist that gets at least 15,000 subscribers on YouTube, I'm looking at signing them.
Yeah.
If they're any good.
Yeah.
So there's the numbers. I mean, those numbers are very small. So, I mean, you know,
that's what struck me back in the 90s was when we were working with the Robs, and they were, you know, they kind of had been successful engineers through the 80s and 70s even, and Atlantic Crossing and Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney, they'd worked on those things, and they got out of producing for a while. But when we were there, they just finished doing Come On Feel the Lemonheads with the Lemonheads, and that went gold. And they knocked back doing Guns N' Roses and all these other things. But all the album budgets were like, even in the 90s, were like 250, 300 grand for the budgets. And you're sort of coming from Australia, you go, well, how does that work? And it's something I see not just in music too. Here, one thing about Australia, and one thing I think we struggle with, is we're kind of isolated from the real world industries in some way. And even my journey in China, you know, I had a lot of strong relationships there, and I got drawn out of my music into trying to make things work by, you know, helping out and getting involved in other business areas. But the thing is, you talk to Australian businesses about the opportunities they could step into, and the attitude here was always, well, how do we minimize what we have to spend, and how do we just kind of leverage it so we don't have to take any risk? And that's impossible in those markets. You can't. So you're always trying to do things for people where they haven't got the budget. They don't actually want to really expose it. You get them to a point and they're not prepared for it. Whereas I did find in America that when someone decided they were going to back something, they actually backed it to the point where it could work properly.
Well, and it comes down to the personality, as you know. I mean, I've come across that personality all the time, even in America. I think it's more when they put something out in the record side and they realize they need to really inject some cash to push it over the edge, they'll do it. And it's easier for managers in Sony or Warner's to be spending money that's not theirs. As soon as it's private capital, you go back to that attitude again. So
here in Australia, we always had the situation where there were a few channels that made things work, like whether it was Michael Gudinski or Sony or you know, Chuggies or whatever. If you go in the 80s particularly, you got signed with one of those organizations, you were going to have a hit. You're going to, you know, do well. Was it the same over there, or were there sort of little bottles that people had to be involved with to be successful, or was it wider?
You know, a lot of my early days, I was spoilt by having a budget to record really good demos and really good stuff, and have no risk, and you know, just motor along, doing what we loved. Then when I stepped into having to do things a different way, it was kind of like reverting back to how I operated here, except the talent, the talent was, you know, how do I put it? The talent's always good if they've got, you know, a budget behind them, you know. You didn't really find that shitty artists had money. You know, where you find that a lot here, where, you know, more of a substandard artist, you know, the great artists will turn up, they got no money, and the crappy artists turn up and they got tons of money and you can't do anything. You know, normally I found that they'll put some money behind something that's good. And even average there is good, you know. So I got involved in, you can see this on YouTube, there's a song called My America, and this African-American record label called American, what are they called? American United something, I don't know. Anyway, it's a long name. And they hired me to do this single. I actually ended up doing like 6 or 7 sides for them. But I was friends with Trick Pony, which were a Warner Brothers act. I think they were like a goal-selling artists. They were originally 2 guys and a girl, and then she broke away and had a solo career. Her name was Heidi Neufeld, and you would have seen that I Want to Love Like Johnny and June song. It was huge, millions of views on YouTube. And so she was a curb artist, and so I was friendly with them. So they wanted like a male and a female white artist to collaborate with him. So I went to them. He had the budget, and it wasn't cheap. We hired them, and so we did this, collaboration between Trick Pony and this other artist. And we, then we hired, Nicole Zalla, which is Brickshaw Media out of Nashville, very well known publicity company, and that's thousands of dollars a month. And then we hired Tim Riley, which you'll hear him on one of my podcasts, famous record promoter guy. So he then gets the single on all these specific radio programs like Sunrise America and blah, blah, blah. So
mate, sorry to interrupt you, but just say your podcast can be found at themichaelflanders.com, right?
That's my website. But if you just go to YouTube and type in Michael Flanders podcast, all my favorite ones pop up there anyway.
Oh wow! And all those old videos, mate. You used to put up those homemade, wild videos.
Yeah, there's stuff with me, naked in the pool and all that stuff. It's still up there. Yeah. That'll probably be more exciting than my podcast. But
But sorry to if I ask some questions here that you don't want to go down that road, that's fine. Just we don't have to. But I think from an Aussie living here, and you're looking at America, and we get bombarded with the media in our lounge room, constantly. Living in Nashville, what was the racial thing like? Was there racial tension around your neighborhoods, or was it very much a stronghold? Or
no, not in my. And my kids kind of went. At one point, they went to a school called Good Pasture. It was a very Good Pasture Christian school, and so you had to have money to go there. I mean, the school fees alone were costing me over $2,000 a month. So they had a lot of white and black friends, and they were classy. So they made friends there, and then they went. Ben went to the Nashville School of the Arts, and then Caleb and Jasmine acting, and Caleb being a bass player. After that, they decided to go there. And they both had such a wonderful experience there. And that school was predominantly black.
Okay.
So
the image you have of Nashville is kind of a white town. That's not true. It is very racial.
No. And you got to remember, you've got the projects, and so they're got to remember before country music and whatever, you're in the South, you're in the deeps, you're in Tennessee, it's Middle Tennessee, it's called. Yeah. So where we were. So you've got, Arkansas not far, the Mississippi not far, you've got Kentucky not far, you've got Georgia not far, all touching that state.
But
so
amongst your friends, did they have racist tendencies, or is it kind of...
You'll get... with probably shouldn't even say this on a recording, but, you would have obvious redneck men in the music industry that are racists, without a doubt. Then some of my good friends' children married African Americans. My daughter's 2 best friends are African Americans. Yep. Caleb had some black friends and white friends. Her black friends would sleep over at our house all the time. Yeah. She was on FaceTime with them today. So we had them in our home, beautiful kids. So it just depends. I think that, a couple of artists I've worked with out of Alabama, they were kind of that way, but you don't know sometimes whether they're joking or they're not joking.
And you don't know the background, what they've gone through and all that. You can't judge.
No.
So I'm not.
But I think it's people really, especially Australian music industry, I don't think really understand America at all. And I think I didn't either. I think we really fantasize about America. We really think it's so much opportunity. They don't realize how good they got it here and how much money they're making here. And if they realized what kind of salaries people were on over there, and even the musicians, like, one of my dear friends, who's, I believe, probably in one of the greatest steel guitar players in the world and dobro players, who's made good money doing different things. He was playing with two, and I won't mention who he is or the bands, but let's call it very famous bands he played with.
Yep.
He was only making $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to guys here and they think, oh God, I met blah, blah, blah. Oh, they must be making so much money. Well, they got no idea they're making no money. Some of them might be making $350 a night on tour, and they're traveling in a bus 90% of the time. As you know, they're sleeping on a bus. There's no more accommodations like it used to be in motels and stuff. The main artist sometimes flies in, doesn't even get to be on the bus, and they're on a sweaty bus driving around the South, Well,
so back in those days when it was all kind of, everything was, there's cash going everywhere. People forget the fact that all those things were billed to the bands, and all those bands are now in debt or never actually got out of debt because they owed so much money.
Well, that's right. And talking about Dolly, for instance, Danny jumped on the Dolly train because she was spending more than she was making on tour. I mean, he met her, and this is what he told me. I don't know how true it is, but he met her and she was worth about $400 million. She's a billionairess now. And she was touring and losing money touring. She's like, how can I be losing money? And he actually was an accountant, and he went on and showed her how she was losing money. So, I mean, it's really those elaborate kind of touring, those days are gone. Yeah. Those days are gone. People are trying to make money. The fact that streaming has taken, major income away from us, that's the only way they're making money is merchandise and touring,
Yeah, well, that was the big thing. I mean, one thing I've tried to be as vocal as I can as I'm getting online and talking to people is the fact that, obviously COVID's been disastrous for the industry, but it happened before then as well. In the old days, we could sell CDs, you could have a product to sell, you could do your show, you could sell your merch, everything else. But suddenly CD sales were gone, and streaming's only got some value to those artists who can stream millions of tracks. For your average local artist, I wouldn't make enough money to buy a cup of coffee a year out of streaming.
No, well, a guy said to me today in a meeting, he said, oh, look, if I do blah, 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 I'm going to make rah, rah, rah. And I'm like, no, you're not. From a publishing standpoint, I'll tell you exactly what you're going to make.
I've got 7 albums out, maybe 100 songs streaming or whatever. And say, mate, if I made $20 a year out of it, that would be.
Well, I can tell you, we have a title that's done over 1 million streams, and it's a co-write. And I think from one song, we've made $750.
Yeah.
And that's hit over 1 million streams. So
there's got to be something along the way we can put pressure on political bodies to.
I think. Well, I've been told.
I want to ask you something here about Nashville and the second structure there. What I'll just explain here first. One of the things that's annoyed me with this whole COVID thing is that the industry's been squashed. Not only did we lose streaming, but we then lost our only form of income, which was live music. And so everyone was screwed. And how that's going to come out, we don't know, the whole thing of it. But people are still loving music. They're still listening to music. Music's an important part of our life. Now, I think now's the time to reset the industry a bit. And it's not about politicians or political parties putting money into arts councils to fund a project or this project. We need to get some structure around the gig economy so that musicians, mate, I'm probably the world's worst person for looking at a bank statement. I literally go into a panic attack. I'm not good at that side of things. And a lot of musos are kind of like that. We need to be free to do our creative thing, but the business thing doesn't always work well. I'd love to see a structure put in place whereby, say, when you do a gig, money can be paid to an entity where you get paid through that entity, your tax gets taken out, super gets taken out. And we've actually prepared the grassroots industry for situations like we've just had where when we hit a bump in the road, we don't all fall like a house of cards. We have nothing like that here. We used to have the Musicians Union back in the 80s and 70s.
Well, it still operates like that in America.
Well, that's what I'd like to know, mate. What is their system they have there that we could maybe be looking at?
Well, it's very different. Again, there's layers of it there. And I'll start from one end so you understand. So if you were, Lee Bryce or someone, that's a solo artist or whoever you want to name, you would have first a business manager. and then you would have a manager. So your manager actually never touches your money. So your money first goes to the business manager. He takes his share. He divvies it up how it's supposed to be. You get paid from your business manager for your live work. Yeah, that your manager, whether he's booked it through the booking agents or however he's done it, then he gets his share from the business manager. And then if, let's say, for instance, you're, Keith Urban, and you also were lucky enough and you did a bunch of sessions, for instance, if you're a singer, the union is called AFTRA. And so if I had an AFTRA singer sing on a record, I would write 2 checks. I'd write one to them for their, for their pension and their pension fund and their health fund. And then I would write 1 check to the singer. If we were doing a session with 5 or 6 musicians, whether I was the band leader or he has another band leader, we will all be union members, and the band leader would get paid as a band leader, pending what the session was, whether it was what they call a demo session, a limited pressing session, a master scale session, whatever it was. Then different levels of payment would come. Then it would go to the union, and the union would then do the same, take the pension check out, take the money out. And so you would pay, let's say it was $250 for that guitar player. Well, it might be $275 and $25 goes into your health fund, and then the rest goes to the player.
And is that system still holding up in the day and age where it's more artists trying to fund themselves?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's still visible today.
Right.
So if you choose not to be a union member, it's up to you. But, it's still like musicians that play on master scale sessions that are union members really benefit from it.
Yep.
I
mean, I'm all for some type of union here for the gig economy people, and I'm not just talking about musicians. This is people who work in hospitality, people in tourism. There's no one representing us at all, and so these things happen. It's easy for the government to just get on there, and this is federal and state government, both sides of the fence. They get on there, they'll sort of throw bread to the pigeons, and they actually do nothing. And we have nowhere to go. We have nowhere that happens. The hotels, these hotels that can stay open till 4 or 5 in the morning because of poker machines, and all they're doing is ripping off. They're either ripping off people who are addicted, or there's money laundering going on. I reckon that's just. I have no fact to that, so don't get at me about that. That's my opinion. But I reckon if they can get stay open to those hours, why shouldn't they have to employ a musician every night of the week?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I think, but the trouble is the way I agree with you. The whole COVID thing has certainly shown you that they don't really care too much about the industry. They let it fail. And they
don't think of it as a big money industry, but it's a huge money industry.
The thing that gets me is who's the first people to come to any rescue when there's a big problem.
Exactly. The fires this year, mate, that we'll get more fires across the country, and there's going to be concerts put on to help everybody, I can tell you.
Yep. Yeah, it's just ludicrous. It really is. But anyway, that's kind of how it works in that town.
Well, I think we need to be tapping into people like yourself who've seen that firsthand, and we need to be like, getting that advice and getting. I know that you hung out with some of the old boys in the industry today. It's us guys who've been around for a while. It's now our job, I think, to start, saying, okay, the reason we have Keith Urban, the reason we have Powderfinger or Savage Garden, these things, is because back in those days, going back in the 80s and 90s, we had a really fertile grassroots industry. People could make their money out of gigging. They could be writing every day. They could be doing all that stuff. But these days, my kids trying to do music, they can't make money out of gigging. There's just not the gigs there to survive on it. We've got to revitalise that industry so that the Keith Urbans of the world can come through. And then we need to have incentives for them to be able to stay in country, in our state, so that the industry is getting the benefits of them being funded here. And until the government takes that serious, we have to start making a lot of noise. That's my argument anyway.
Yeah. Well, and it has to be directed the right way, as you know. It really has to come down to, where to hit that nail on the head, that they actually will listen. And when we do bring the hammer down, it makes perfect sense for them to hand us a nail,
Yeah. So, mate, I know that you were connected to everyone in America. So, was the election rigged?
Ah,
Yeah,
who knows?
You don't have to go down that road, mate.
Don't know. Don't really know.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of, like everyone, have been kind of watching, whether we can even call it an outcome, but I'd say from what I'm hearing, the tables could be turning,
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting times, mate. I think there's definitely more going on than what we see.
oh,
The media, yeah, I see there's two things happening in America. Kind of democracy is no longer exists because the corporations have really, they control that. In Australia,
yep.
I don't know if it's corporations that control it so much here, but we definitely have party politics. That you get people go into parliament, they've got good intentions, and it gets squeezed out of them because they have to follow the party line. And we can sit here and we can sort of point fingers at America, but mate, I look at what's going on with the mismanagement at the moment of our relationship with the China thing. It's just that's going to put so much pressure on us. The government's doing a terrible job with managing that situation, and I think all the stuff around the COVID thing too. It's all been so one-dimensional. We get such limited information. It's kind of amazing to me that the numbers have dropped severely at the time of heat waves coming through. Is there something there? I don't know, but I just like to see us talking about more than just if someone's comes up with a positive test, they lock down the whole city. I think there's got to be a better solution than that.
Oh, totally. I mean, I'm like you. I kind of think.
What was it like coming back here, mate? Because you got to have a beautiful 14-day holiday, didn't you?
Yeah, it was probably the most enjoyable holiday I've ever had in my entire life, to be honest. I was, if I didn't have a steel guitar and an amplifier, I think I would have thrown myself over that balcony.
How were you treated, mate?
Terrible. I mean, it was absolutely terrible. The food was disgusting. The attitude was not good. They actually thought that people were, had, the virus. They were treating you like you had the virus. Phone calls every day that were uneducated phone calls. It was probably the most ridiculous 14 days I've ever spent,
Wow.
And it's not easy. 14 days being in one room and having a little tiny balcony. It was not easy. I think I literally would have gone nuts if I didn't have that guitar with me. I kind of prepped myself for it. And before I left, I gathered a lot of like educational stuff that I could study while I was in that 14-day period, which really helped my brain. And of course, red wine at night was the worst red wine I think they had in the hotel. It tasted like raw vinegar. But it worked, and I was kind of falling asleep like 9 o'clock at night and waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was really weird. And there was no movies. If you wanted a movie, it was $18 to get a movie. And so I had the SBS movie channel available to me, and that was thrilling. So that was my experience.
Oh, mate, you must have jumped for joy when you got out of there.
Oh man, it took a few days to feel human, but it's really weird. I suppose it's like giving birth. Eventually, you don't think about the pain a week later, So,
where to from here, from Mick Flanders, mate? What's the story?
Trying to figure it out. I think there's a lot of little opportunities. So I'm just trying to figure out what the smart money is. We've got our equipment coming over on our ship. So I've got all my instruments and all my computer and preamps and mics and all that. So it'll be good to have that back.
So you'll be producing artists out here, will you?
Yeah. So, and I've still got a few American projects going, and I'm sure that's going to continue. I've kept my American phone and phone number and my American email, and I've got a few lines in the water there. And I'm kind of, having a look around here, what's going to be kind of exciting, and taking a few meetings. And, I did a session last week, so I'm getting into the session world here a bit, playing some steel and dobro. So, yeah, see what happens.
I imagine that, are you finding that people are a bit hungry to tap into your knowledge, to tap into your
yes and no. I think a lot of people don't really realize the knowledge. I don't think they really understand what really occurs in those environments. I think And I get that because I thought a lot, I knew a lot more even by visiting. I'd visited that Nashville probably, 15 times or something before I moved. And the same old story. You think you know everything and what to do, and you land there, and you might as well be shipwrecked.
Mate,
you don't.
I'm sure a lot of young artists don't know. So let's say if they're trying to get somewhere there in that sort of probably country edge to what they're doing, I guess would probably be fair to say. And they hear you chatting about what you're doing and your experience, and they think, oh, gee, it'd be great to work with someone like that. Are you untouchable to work with like that? Are you easy to work with? And what do you bring to the table? You just record someone, or do you give them some of your knowledge and advice? What happens?
Well, I'm me. I'm always open to help anybody.
I do, but mate, other people don't. You come back from Nashville, and some young people will be thinking, well, how do you get onto a guy like that to work with? I mean, I know that you'd love to work with young artists coming through.
Yeah, I would like to develop some things that have potential to go over there. And just like we spoke about Dolly, I mean, Danny Nozell is her manager. Him and I are very good friends. I mean, I can name a dozen managers that are heavy hitters over there that are very close with me. And I got a lot of work through those management companies. I developed some artists that they were developing, recorded them and wrote with them and developed them and arranged it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if the artist is right and it has potential, there's definitely roads to take, and they would not be roads of fantasy. They'd be roads of realistic goals and achievements that you really need to understand. And I think that's the biggest problem. You and I both know there's a bunch of artists over there from here, from all over the world, but from here that somehow have stars in their eyes, and they're over there playing bars. They might as well be playing a bar here and actually getting paid, opposed to over there working for tips, and then their parents are sending money over every week to try and pay their rent.
No, we all know what it's like to do stuff.
There.
Yeah, we all know it's like to do gigs in the States, and you sort of come back in, you tell the story that it was bigger than it was. That's the way it works. You always build that up, because it's great that you're in the States, you're doing it. That's great. But the reality is, you're probably playing, as you say, in a bar. Because one thing I found about Los Angeles was to really do something there, you had to be accepted as a bit of a local. You do. And the thing is if a lot of people don't realize, if you end up going, especially in Nashville, if you go and play the bars, and the majors know that because they come down and they watch people, don't they actually do. There's been signings from Broadway. Yeah. After a while, it's like, oh, no one's picked them up. They mustn't be any good. Next. Yeah. And then you wonder, like bands like people say, oh, Powderfinger or Cold Chisel, they never did it in the States. Well, why would they bother? They'd have to go through the hard yards of slogging there, where they can come back to Australia and Europe and make good money.
Well, I know, Bernard did the solo record, Powderfinger Bernard.
Yep.
And I remember sitting with Kim Buey. I don't know if this is politically incorrect to say this, but I said,
I don't care about this. This is all about chatting and gasbagging. So
Kim Buey was the Lost Highway A&R director. And Lost Highway had Ryan Adams and Lucinda and blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, so you've picked up the Songbird record, Bernie's an Aussie. Yeah. She just shrugged it off. It's just a reciprocal deal. Yeah. That would move on. That was it. Yeah. So you knew they weren't going to get any attention. Yeah. And it sold 500,000 copies or something in Australia.
Well, I remember when we got to meeting at one of the publishing companies over in LA, and at the time they were actually sitting there listening to Paul Kelly stuff and asked our opinion of it. Like, well, absolutely fantastic, but they were like, it was like another demo coming through for them, it was just
it would have been. Yeah. What is this?
Is this any good? Listen to it, you'll know.
Yeah. Well, the hardest thing is they've got so much,
exactly,
from so much. And Los Angeles, New York, and Nashville are the three hubs where the greatest people in the world go there to try and have a career.
Yeah.
So that's why you see the level. And then when LA and New York studios started to shut down, all those musicians and studio owners and whatever, they all went to Nashville. Yeah. So it's this massive influx of people. They were saying 90 people a day were coming to Nashville.
Yeah, apparently
So
Texas has gone crazy too. They reckon all those states.
well, just getting on the interstate and coming home if you were downtown was terrible. I mean, traffic became difficult to get around. So, working from home became, the way to go. And when I bought my studio to the house.
Then with those numbers too, like people don't realize that a big part of the industry over there, I found, was actually artists being kept off the market. So they would get signed to be kept off the market. And there's all these things that, if you've got an act that sounds like Nirvana, you don't want 10 other Nirvanas on the market. So keep them off the market. And these things that a lot of artists don't understand. And I think this is the opportunity to work with someone like yourself, to get that extra advice while you're working on it, and also about publishing and all these other things behind it. This is where we start. I think it's important, mate, you coming back into the industry, working so that grassroots can be healthier, and we can get these people coming through. And look, young artists have to realize that when you're doing these things, if you're buying a plastic toy, you get a plastic toy. Some things cost a little bit more to do, but it's not like hundreds of thousands of dollars they have to come up with to do their art and their work. It's actually very doable if you make a plan for it. You set out what you're going to do and you head towards it. And that's the type of advice that I imagine you would also probably have with them at their early meetings and discussions, and how, what are the budgets, how are you going to meet those budgets, and what's realistic.
Yeah, well, that's right. And the beautiful thing now here is, Mike Flanders now to Mike Flanders when he left in 2007. Now the Teledex looks very different, doesn't it? And the education's very different. And I think the other thing is I've really honed my skill set now. Yeah. So now it's even, that knife is way sharper than it used to be.
Well, also that Teledex is now also full of relationships and experiences as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and picking up the phone to any one of those guys, and no one probably, I kind of consider a lot of the people really close friends, because most of them in the Teledex, there's a relationship behind it, Yeah.
And you there?
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if that cut off. The other thing I think young artists need to realize is too, while those relationships exist, you need to be using those with some credibility behind them. So artists need to make sure they get to a certain level where they've got momentum happening. Then those things can be used to help them go further. But if you can't make yourself successful at Ipswich or Rockhampton market, you're going to really struggle in Los Angeles or Nashville. You've got to make sure that you've got that early movement going on.
Well, I think if people spend the time to listen to our chat tonight, and then go and get onto YouTube and listen to a couple of my podcasts. One of them is with Mike Kraske, which was the chairman of Sony Music Nashville. One of them is with Tim Riley, which is one of the major radio pluggers in Nashville, came from Memphis. One of them is from Joe Kelly, who runs the biggest radio CD distribution company in America. They can see the connections. They can see what we could do with them if the quality is there.
Yeah, right.
And the finances are there. And I did a lot of those podcasts in the latter part of doing the podcasting to basically help independent artists and to show them that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Excellent. Well, mate, I'm pretty excited about as crazy as the industry is. I think there's still a bright future, because I see what, my kids and your kids are doing and their friends are doing. And there's such a wealth of really talented people out there writing songs, playing music. And they're so far advanced from where we were at their age.
Well, I think so too. And I think that, you and Angie produce talented kids, and Chase and I produce talented kids, and their job is to be better than we were.
Yeah. I think they got a much better global understanding too. This whole thing of, when I grew up, the people in the Middle East were those mob over there. Now they're their friends they grew up with school in. There's the much, and they're on the internet. They know more. I'll hear my youngest daughter. She'll be listening and singing along to a song from the '60s, and I'll say, "Where do you know that from?" And they just have this wider appreciation of everything. And I really admire what they're doing. And that's really, really cool. And I'm excited.
I was going to say that earlier. Caleb gets me hip to things that I love, and and I think that's what's great about having youth running around on your feet at that age, because we're getting exposed to, and we should be in the business we're in. We should be getting exposed to as much as we possibly can always. So it's great having young ones saying, hey, you listen to this, and you jump in the car, and Jasmine has her playlist and I nearly vomit, and, oh, you're torturing me, thank God Caleb likes stuff I like. And they used to say, I'll put Dad's iPod on and just slit your wrist,
Well, I should mention too that I do intend that you and I have to be getting the show on the road as well together.
Sounds good to me.
And some gigging and some of my best. Well, you've worked on most of my music, mate. So it's my best moments have been working with you in the studio, but also on stage, mate. It's like
looking forward to an opera house show, mate. Can we do that?
Which one?
An opera house show. We've never done the opera house.
I reckon we should head towards that. Just make sure these borders stay open, and we'll just rock the whole Australian world, I reckon.
That's next.
That's next, mate. Yeah, we'll do our Gasbaggin part 2 about as we conquer the local world.
Yeah, our experiences getting in the front door of the opera house.
That's it. Well, mate, I'm so excited that you're back home. Thanks for taking this time to chat about everything. And is there anything else you wanted to chat about, or we covered a fair bit?
I think we're good. I haven't had dinner yet, so I'm probably starting to wind down my energy levels.
Mate, you've got that red wine there that tastes better than the vinegar stuff now to work on this.
Yeah. A little glass of that, so I didn't blah, blah on the podcast. And it's some kind of Malbec, and had one rum after I mowed the lawn. So I'm easing in on it tonight. So.
I am really impressed when you told me that earlier, that you're still mowing your own lawn, because I'd hate to think you'd turn totally into not doing your yard, mate. It's
I actually enjoy mowing lawns. Funny enough, it's kind of therapeutic.
I've written quite a few songs with the mower in hand.
Yep. I love it. I hate to admit it, but yeah.
Right, it's good. It's good to have those moments where a screen isn't in front of you, or there isn't something.
Oh, totally. And this place we're staying at, it's got a nice pool too. So I mowed the lawn and then dived in the pool.
Yeah. Well, I've still got to catch up with you and have a pool party there, mate. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, you'll like it. It's got a nice view. You'll like it. It's up to your standards, mate. It's up to your standards.
Oh, buddy, really good to chat to you, and thanks so much for your time. And mate, let's keep gasbagging in the future.
No worries. Thanks for having me. I hope people listen to us.
Thanks, matey. See you, Mike. Michael Flanders.
See you, champ. Bye.
Parks are all closed, locked up in chains. No children's laughter restrains, silence reigns. No school bells ringing, footsteps in the halls. No choir singing, there's no chasing balls. Politicians are acting quite civil these days. Not kissing babies or stomping on graves. Australia sails on tacking into the wind. Not sure what tomorrow will bring. And from history's pages, our former stages, battled through hard times before. Yeah, they suffered losses, implanted crosses, then dragged themselves off the floor. So the young and free, all good by the sea, and inspired by what came before, can look at the sky with big open eyes, knowing that we can be more. For people who care, there's a future to share. Advance Australia where? In 1918, the Anzacs sailed home, too tired for glory, too many alone. Having faced war, then facing disease, a terror before that we'd never seen. Oh yes, it's true, we've been here before, and our country's spirit was built through it all. We carried the wounded to safer high ground, walked through the storm and we found. And from history's pages, our former stages, battled through hard times before. Yeah, they suffered losses, implanted crosses, then dragged themselves off the floor. So the young and free, all good by the sea, and inspired by what came before, can look at the sky with big open eyes, knowing that we can be more. For people who care, there's a as the easterly blows. Stars come alive and the Southern Cross glows, and dreamtime is calling us back to a place where we knew our souls were free. Seagulls are skimming low over waves. Rain is now falling on dry, dusty plains, with people still wiping smoke from their eyes. Nature is cleaning up big open skies to turn off the darkness, turn off the pain. After the drought there'll always be rain. Another day comes with the new rising sun, and we run towards what we can become.